Hello and welcome to this new episode. Before we go into the episode, I want to thank you for the emails and comments I'm receiving. It really warms my heart every time I hear that this podcast is actually being received and that is helpful. So that's really helpful for me to hear. So thank you for that. And also, I just want to celebrate you because from the emails and the messages I've received so far, it's like, wow, there's such a a tribe forming, a bunch of really, really potent women, amazing women out there listening to this, and I am honored that you're sharing your time with me in this space, and I really want to celebrate you because the stories I'm hearing are very moving, and we all know we are here sharing the fact that we still have narcissistic mothers, and we've been through a lot, for sure. But to hear you, like to read your words, to see what you've been through, to be able to receive your words is potent, and I want to celebrate you for reaching out and for sharing, because that's challenging and courageous, and I want to honor you for that. So yeah, I just wanted to say that before we start, because the episode today is about the impact that maternal narcissism has on friendship. And I use the word friendship, but I really mean connection, really, of any sort with other women, in particular. So yeah, let's dive in. I want to ask you to start, like, how many good friends have you got? Take a moment and just see how many there are out there that you can call friends, and how many of them are women. And I'm not referring here to people that you know and you might share some hi and goodbye every now and again, a couple of words and a coffee. I'm talking about friends, like in the sense that you have a connection with these women, where and when you are in their presence, you can be yourself fully. You can truly talk about everything with these people, women who know the best and worst of you and still love you for who you are. So I'm going to ask you again, how many of those friends have you got? So if you're answering a big number and you have many, good for you. I'm happy for you from my heart. But the reality of this is that for the most of us, to be able to say we even have one real good girlfriend is a true blessing, and it is very rare. In fact, the majority of women I'm talking to don't have any at all. And this has also been my personal experience for such a long time. And it still is a challenge. Like, I still find it challenging to really say who is, like, when I'm asking that question to myself, there's one person that comes to mind, and I do know a lot of people. So it's rare indeed. But why is that? Why do we find it so challenging? And maybe some of you have many good friends, but those are indeed men. And so that's another thing that we're gonna talk about here. Like, I do get that a lot, and I also had that in my past too, like getting on with men really, really well and finding it extremely hard to get on with women. And so we're gonna talk to that too. One of the things I hear the most in my work with women is how lonely the vast majority of them are feeling. And I really get that. And there is a struggle with believing that it is even possible to be seen, felt, and understood by another woman. And for most daughters of narcissistic mothers, it is actually quite scary to open up and be vulnerable at all in front of one or more other women. And again, that is very understandable. And we're going to see why that is in this episode. And we're going to go deep into this topic. I've personally struggled my whole life with friendship, from childhood all the way to now. I've had many lovely friends, and again, as I said, guess what? They were all men. And the me of a couple of years ago would have cried over this and told you that I've tried so hard to have girlfriends, but the women are too mean, too competitive, too judgmental, false, and that they want too much from me, and they just don't like me. That's it. And as you can see in this, there's a lot of they. Okay, like they're this, they're that. They don't like me. They want too much. They. And while this wasn't really working, the result was I still was very lonely. I still had no friends. And also, I've noticed how the friendships with men were actually getting more and more complicated, because it's one thing when you're like a teenager to have a lot of boys that you're friends with. My best friend was a boy for 7 years in my teens, and that was all well and good, but it starts getting very complex when you are an adult, and there's a lot more implications in those friendships, and you start realizing that a lot of those men that you thought you were getting on very well with actually were looking for a lot more than friendship, where you weren't. So it can bring complications, let's say, in it. So I just wanted to strip it back. I just wanted to understand why that was, and this whole pointing the fingers at other women was a narrative that really wasn't working. So the more I stripped it back, the more the story shifted to myself. So more along the lines of, I am the problem. I am the reason I have no friends. All those things I'm seeing and not liking in them, in these women, I actually am those things. So I am mean, I'm competitive, I'm judgmental, I'm false, I'm not opening up, blah, blah, blah. And this doesn't sound as much of an improvement, because it is very uncomfortable, actually, to go through this phase, but it is a layer deeper than the previous way of looking at it. So we start shifting from blaming other women to start seeing the responsibility that we have. Now it's tricky, because this is not so useful, actually, if from this point we're going into self-loathing. Which of course I did for a long time. I put myself down. I felt bad for not being able to have friends, and put all the responsibility and the fault on me. I was faulty. So being faulty and being responsible are two very different things. I want to slow down for a moment on this. Faulty means there's something irreparably damaged and broken in you, even inherently, like from the day you were born, and it's not fixable. It's just or that you have to work to fix it in order to become unfaulty. Responsible, it means that you are having an experience that is not helpful, but you are response-able. So you are able to respond to that and take whatever step to shift into a better experience, into the possibility of having a better experience. So you can see how that is different. Faulty, it's a very toxic, negative way of looking at it. And I know that comes from the beliefs that our narcissistic mothers have just confirmed for us for so long. But response-able is the opposite of it. Actually, you're not faulty at all. You are totally responsible. You've had experiences, things have happened to you in the past. You've grown up believing certain things about yourself or believing certain things about other women. None of this is your fault, but you are response-able. So you are able to respond to the situation and move from a pattern that is unhelpful and toxic into opening new pathways and being able to connect. So to go back to the experience, I went through this phase of putting myself down, and all the beliefs that were formed in my childhood through my upbringing with my mother came in. And so all the usual ones of not being good enough, maybe not being able, needing to please others, but not being able to please others enough to keep them around. Like my parents both my father left when I was very young, and although he stayed close by, I was seeing him very rarely. My mother neglected since I was very young. So I was about 1 year old when they both kind of became not very present in my life. So I came up with this needing of pleasing others, so to keep them in my life. And if I don't please enough, then they go away. This is like a really not very helpful belief that has caused a lot of pain in my life. So that showed up even in friendships. And obviously not being worthy of friends. I mean, if I'm not worthy of my parents to stick around, definitely I'm not worthy of friends. So again, that's a phase, and you might be already in this. You might not have even gone through the blaming of other women at all. I've seen that. Like some people are more like on the attacking of others quite a bit, and some others are just more on straight away on the self-attacking, self-loading. So there's no better or worse here. There's just different strategies, and it can depend on your past. And we're going to look into how this works and why we're taking more to one than another. But so I'm not here to say some of us are doing it better than others. These are just different ways we're experiencing these. And these are all the ways that the maternal narcissism is impacting our way to connect and have friends, ultimately, and to open up with other women and actually have wonderful and rewarding relationships. So I went deeper again. I kept stripping it back. Moving through this thick, horrible layer of toxic patterns and beliefs, and I realized how truly it was impossible for others to be friends with me, and especially for women, because I was desperately protecting myself from one woman, my mother. Okay? Like all the ways I was presenting myself when I introduced myself to any bunch of women, whether it was a women's circle, whether it was a course I was attending that was women only, whether it was my clients in a yoga class, my work clients, whether it was my people that were actually just meant to be friends, they weren't even work related. It didn't matter the surroundings. The way I was posing myself was always shields up. There is a bitch in the room, and that is my mother, but I didn't know I was doing that. Can you see how that's not really helpful if you're trying to establish like a good relationship and connection with someone? If like you're seeing that person through a filter that makes her a monster because you've had a monster in your life growing up. Which way that monster operated in your life, we are just using that filter onto every woman, and we don't know we're doing it. So that's a big load that gets put onto anyone that we're meeting. And it can be really hard to admit to that, but it was really key in unblocking a lot of healing for me personally. And that's why I want to share this. So as daughters of narcissistic mothers, we all carry mother wounds inside, we know that. And a lot of which is still undealt with because it's part of the process. I mean, if you are still feeling a lot of the consequences, is clearly because not all of it has been dealt with. That's why you're here. So this causes us to be guarded and frozen, stuck in repeating patterns and protective strategies, as we said, all to avoid feeling like we felt when our mothers put us down. yelled at us, ridiculed us, left us, like abandoned us, gave us the silence treatment, told us we were bad, and so on. And some of us, many of us, are still experiencing this in our adult life. So we're going back to, of course, we're protecting the inner child from what we experienced when we were like really small, but we're also still experiencing that. Like I get lots of you reaching out saying how your mothers are still sending you messages like that or talking to you like that constantly in your everyday life, and you're in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, and still this goes on. So I know that for many of us, we can indeed do a lot of talking, and maybe even with other women, and feel like we've got friends and we're so open about ourselves and we're just like so kind and friendly with everyone. So no, it's not true I'm presenting myself like this. I'm actually really loving with all the women that I'm meeting, and still I'm not getting anything in return. So it must be their fault. And I have been there. I have spoken like that about myself. So maybe you can recognize yourself in that too. Maybe you talk a lot about what your mother does or doesn't do. Maybe you even talk about your childhood, and you can say out loud how your mother was the worst narcissist ever. Maybe you went counseling or you've done a therapy and you talked about it for years. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that is a bad thing. It's a really good starting point to be able to speak to something, but it's most definitely not enough. The healing does not happen through talking. And like, I'm not the only one that says this. There's a heap of incredible people that study trauma, that study wounds, that have studied all of this for years, and they've all come to the same conclusion. Talking it's an opening up, it's a beginning, it's a start, but it is not where the healing happens. Dealing with mother wounds and the trauma we carry inside is about diving deep into the ocean of your emotions. It means going into those places within you that you so desperately try to hide and protect. It means feeling all of it on a cellular level. Anything else, after a while, becomes lip service. And I know that because I was the champion at talking about all that happened to me, my childhood, my mother, and what she did, the sexual abuse I've been through. I could do so much talking. It's like people were really going like, wow, she's so amazing. Like, I mean, she can talk about all this stuff and so easily. And they didn't know the mess that was happening inside. You know, it's a really cool facade to have, because it seems like you're doing really great, but you're not. Because if you're being honest with yourself, which I had to get honest with myself, inside you're crumbling, but yet you can talk. And how do I know it was all surface work? How do we know that? How do we know that it's not really working? And there's a very simple answer to that. Because the patterns repeat. Because you're still in the same loop. You know, I was still experiencing the same crushing anxiety, the same lack of friends, and the loneliness, this painful loneliness, and the same constant feeling of inadequacy. So no matter how much I talked, those were still there. Hence, that was lip service. So we need to understand that as a child, your mother is your world. Okay, she represents all women. The way she behaves with you becomes the example of relating with other women. Maternal narcissism is a relational trauma, a relational wound. Okay, that it creates a relational wound. If your mother was nurturing and loving how it would be in an ideal world with no mother wounds to deal with, at some point you would have started to develop your own way of relating, supported by her gentle guidance. Her example would have been like soft and lovely and kind, and you would have taken that on board. She would have respected your identity and taught you how to set boundaries, which is very important when we're relating with others, and so on. But a narcissistic mother is not nurturing. She does not respect your identity. Actually, she blocks it, stifles it, and tries her best to destroy it. She hates boundaries. And what's disguised as guidance is far from gentle, but a big set of truths and opinions you have to go with or else. Okay? Every comment she makes is laced with judgment, and in some cases, she might have often told you how the world is mean and will put you down. So she puts in beliefs that everything around is bad so that she can be the hero of your life, and that keeps on the control. So you can see how if this represents all women, that's not very reassuring, okay? Why would you feel safe in opening up to be friends with other women when that's the experience you've had? Can you see now how or why it is perfectly understandable the way you might have been guarded and unable to open up to friendship and connection with women so far? And I say that because, like, I do get women reaching out saying that there's something wrong with them, that they can't make friends, and they see all these other women that are all friends and they just struggle to make friends. I remember watching American movies where there's like these women that met up after years and they've been friends through college, and then they meet again and they're super good friends and they share all these giggles and laughing together, and they go shopping together and they do all this cool shit together. And I was like, I don't have that in my life. Nothing even remotely similar to that. And yeah, like, you start seeing that I hope that by understanding the impact that your mother has had on all this, you start seeing how, well, first of all, women are not all mean, competitive, judgmental, and bad. And that doesn't have to be the experience. And also, you are not broken, faulty for not having been able so far to make some deep, real connections with other women. So when I began to realize all this, I decided I was going to approach the whole friendship thing differently from then on. Okay, I went, okay, I got all this, now we're going to do things differently. So I did. I started with one woman that I was in contact with due to my children and different things. So it was easy. And it seemed we got on well, and we did meet weekly, and it seemed on the surface that it was going really well. And yet every time we met, I felt like crap afterwards. I was so exhausted. I was really caught in my head. And I didn't truly understand what was going on with that. I mean, we seemed to get on well. So it took me a few more experiences like this one, to realize that I had gone on the other side of the scale. So from super guarded, I had gone to boundaryless. From not caring at all, I had become needy, which makes the relationship not so good, obviously, and not so safe for both parts. So again, that showed me there was more work to be done, and as it is often the case when we feel very challenged, and I really felt very, very challenged in that. So again, this is something I want to speak, because when I'm talking about we're approaching connections with other women and we're always guarded, I don't want you to drop all your shields down in one go. I've done that, and that's not helpful, and that can result in some really difficult experiences. And I'm not saying that when we're trying to make deeper connections with other people that we're never gonna get hurt, because I mean, you can't avoid that. It kind of is part and parcel of the whole thing. You're not always gonna connect with the right people, and it's not always that simple to tell. But the more you get to know yourself, the more you get grounded in your identity, the more you get good at setting boundaries, this is going to become an easier task. I promise. It's not always going to be this challenging. But yeah, I want you to keep your discernment. That's important. We can't just go from one extreme to the other. Both extremes are not helpful. We need to be some way in the middle where we are open to be vulnerable, we're open to connect, but we're also discerning. There's some places where that's a good thing, and some places where we don't want to open so much, and there's a reason why we're feeling like we don't want to. The other person is not ready. Remember that everyone has their own stories, has their own experiences, and so we need to make sure that the other person is ready also. Okay? So again, I went deeper still because that's what I do. That's just what I do. Um, and I discovered there are different reasons why, as daughters of narcissistic mothers, we find it so difficult to make friends with women. And it does depend on a few factors. Three things in specific, that just to simplify it and to make it understandable. And the first factor is the kind of relationship you have with your mother. So what type of narcissistic traits she displayed, for example. Was she covert? Was she very in your face abusive? Was there like physical violence, emotional violence, different things? That does influence how then you're going to relate. Number two is how you react to your mother. As in, are you seeking her approval all the time? Or are you more like the rebel type that goes against her? So is it like a direct seeking for connection, or an indirect sort of approach, which both are actually seeking connection at the base of it, but in a different way. So that is a factor too. That will determine how you relate with other women as well. And three, the first two that I'm just talking about determine what protective strategies you've developed growing up. For example, are you like more the withdrawn type and quiet, or are you more superficially extroverted and friends with everybody and talk? So, or do you tend to go on the attack preventatively, or are you more submissive or accommodating? So that's the third factor, is how you have translated all of these experiences you've had, and then how you project all of that into your life and into the connections you make. So that's personal to you. You are the one that interprets. Okay, so we could have, for that, this is what differentiate, like we could have 100 women that have been the same kind of relationship with their mother. So factor one, they could have reacted in the exact same way too, but yet the way they relate is different, because you are also a factor in all of this, and we're all unique. So it took me a while to figure this out for myself, and it came with a lot of pain and disappointment in the first attempts at relating with other women. Not even in friendship, actually, not even when I was seeking like deep connections, but in relating with other women in any way at all. Like, I know I meet mothers of friends of my daughters, for example, and some of them I get to meet them often, or women in the healing spaces I've attended, as I mentioned, like some women's circles and places like that. Even women I interacted with for work reason. You see, when you're working, some of you might work in some environment where you have to deal with a lot of women. Like, my work is with women, so my clients are all women, and they project, and I project. I did project. So that can happen too, and it can create really difficult in situations. So I had to go through that to understand all of this. So the work in women's circles was a great support in all of this, because actually important point, and this can only happen if the container of the circle is properly set. That's essential. Okay, not, as I mentioned, women's circles have also been a place where I've encountered a lot of issues. So yes, there is a part where you gotta look and see, okay, how am I posing myself here? I clearly have wounds, and these are affecting the way I'm connecting with women. So let's not blame the container, let's not blame the circle, because some circles are run really, really well, and yet they're going to challenge you because that's what they do. If you have relational wounds, you're going to be challenged when you're in a container where you need to relate, and that's part of the healing process. But also, there is a lot of circles out there that are a lot of commercialized nonsense, and so we need to be discerning. Okay, that's very important. But when I have been in women's circles where the container was properly set, and I just moved through some of the inner challenges that I have, I was able to safely explore how I presented myself and how I reacted to other women with someone that gave me the proper guidance, and that was really healing. Really, really, really healing. Okay, so that's important to speak, because again, it's a relational wound, and healing it through relationship is really, really good. But if we're trying to heal this relational wound through relationship with random people, this is very unsafe for us and for the people involved. Where when you're in a container that is set, where everyone has agreed that this is what we're doing here, then that makes it super safe for you and also super safe for all the other people involved, which is very important. So all of this work, all of this to come up with understanding that there are 5 unhelpful patterns that we fall into when we are trying to relate, and as a result of being the daughters of narcissistic mothers. And we're gonna go into those now. So, number 1, projecting your mother in every woman you relate with. Here is where you literally see every woman as if she was your mother, whether you're aware of it or not. But if you're not aware of this, it's some big, big barrier to start in relating. And it also is very unfair on the people that you are trying to relate to. And if you have noticed, you could notice that you are meeting a lot of similar traits in friends. It's a point to start looking into, because sometimes the projection, it kind of brings that on in the other person in some really weird way. Again, this is the discerning part. Some are just like that, but some are not, and whatever way we're interacting, we're just bringing that forward. Okay, that's what happens when we relate. So projecting your mother in every woman you relate with is one unhelpful pattern. Number 2, recreating same patterns of relating. So by recreating the trauma, our system is attempting to heal it, okay? But without awareness of it and without the necessary support, this becomes a never-ending cycle of pain. So we recreate similar experiences, like some of the women that I started relating with and open up with when I was still not aware of this were highly narcissistic, and they had very similar judgment patterns as my mother, very similar way to put me down, and without awareness that was actually really difficult to navigate. So again, recreating that the system tries to recreate the trauma so that we can heal it, but without knowing it, it makes a mess of it. Number 3, either making other women the problem or completely putting ourselves down. So we've been through that, we spoke to that already. The blaming of others or the self-loathing. Again, not very helpful patterns. 4, being needy and desperate for approval and recognition, which leads to no boundaries and no discernment. Really not where we want to go, but again, it's this. All of this is just reflect, feel into how you approach a relationship with others and with other women, and you might recognize yourself in one or more of these patterns, because there can be a mix. As I often say, when we make lists with bullet points, they're never so distinctly separate. Okay, you might see that you do certain things when you're in certain environments, and then you take on other patterns when you're in other environments. It can be a mix, but it's really important to start understanding what's your way to relate, so that then you can start shifting and respond and make it into a more helpful experience. Number 5, presenting ourselves from behind a wall of protective strategies. So, and also more than likely meeting the same in the other person. So what does that create? A false, superficial friendship that has no trust or safety as a foundation. I'm coming to you, shields up. You're coming to me, shields up. I mean, we can talk about the weather, and we can talk, like, maybe we can end up having a coffee, and if we both love kitten, maybe we can talk a little bit about kittens, but the real deep stuff will never come up because that's unsafe. We're both trying to protect. And if you come to a relationship super guarded, this kind of is sending vibes to the other person that they better be guarded as well. Okay? So it's another pattern. Okay? So what is the solution? Because once we've seen and we've recognized and we're like, okay, this is what I do when I relate, what is the solution? This is tricky. I can't go into specific without knowing you in person, because as we said in the 3 factors, you are one of the factors, and so to get more specific, I would need to be working with you one-on-one. That's what we do in a one-on-one container. We're really just going through, we go through like what you've developed as strategies, your protective patterns, and then we work with that. But we can go a little bit more general, and I can say that the more you open up to your inner story, to the emotions that are underneath the surface, the more you're willing to get uncomfortable and to do the real work, the less you will cling on to those patterns. And what does that mean? It means, first, you will learn to set appropriate boundaries rather than attack before you get hurt. 2, you will learn what behaviors are truly not acceptable to you, and this is personal, of course, to you, and what is instead just a trigger of undealt wounds. And note that sometimes both are true at the same time. That can happen. So awareness can truly support you in navigating such situations. Like, it can happen that someone does something to you that is really, truly not on, and you do feel that. But the way you react to it is because that has also triggered a heap of wounding. And so your reaction is loaded. And that can cause a lot of trouble in a relationship and also a lot of conflict. This also applies to romantic relationships as well. But we're going into friendship and connection with other women now. So to understand and get grounded in your identity and really get what really isn't on for you, you don't like that kind of behavior, you have your grounded reasons for that, but without the load of the trigger, that allows you to set appropriate boundaries, and that leaves the other person actually super safe, and their relationship can continue at times maybe not, but that's the difference. Okay, so really important. Number 3, you will learn to know exactly when it is safe to open up and when it's best not to. So to trust your discernment. And again, there's a thin line between your real discernment, that real wise woman inside you that knows, okay, no, this is not a place where I can safely open up, and the part that is the wounded inner child that just fears opening up even though the situation is perfectly safe. But because we're hypervigilant, our nervous system is like, oh my god, we're gonna die because we died in this situation before, we really suffered. That response is triggered, and then we think we're very unsafe. So that discernment is important, and to learn to know that within you is really important. Number 4, you will inspire trust because you will have more trust in who you are and in your capacity to speak your own truth without putting others down. So when you do that, you become a super safe person to be around, and other people can let their guards down with you, and this starts, it's like at the foundation of true connection with others. And 5, you won't be needy, which will make you a way safer person to be around for others. and also you will feel safer in the interactions, because when you're needy, you don't have boundaries. So when you learn that the needy pattern is not helpful, and you learn that when you're doing it, and you can start understanding, and you can start sort of stopping that, then you are setting like really good boundaries. And again, that makes it safer for everyone. So that's when we're talking about doing the real work. Open up to those uncomfortable emotions, going beyond the talking and the lip service, but going deep into the body, going deep into where it feels like really to go. That's part of the work, but that's what happens. And it's when I say you will learn to, I want to over communicate on this point. I don't mean you're sitting like a student and you're taking notes and you will learn on a rational level to behave da 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 da. That's not what I'm talking about. You are, by doing the work, you are learning all of these things from a real deep inner place. So they're not notes that you're learning, they're pathways that open. So it's not a technique that you're going into a container or into a connection with another person and you're like, well, now I am practicing such and such and such. It just starts happening. And of course, practice is part of it. It is sort of part of the journey. Sometimes we practice to make it more like a natural response, but it comes from within. It's like an inner work, and that's what I really feel this type of work, the work that I do, is quite unique, because a lot of work that I've encountered out there in all my research is all very head-led, and is all very there's a heap of notes you need to take, there's a heaps of principles you need to learn, but it's like a mental exercise rather than an embodied experience. And I found in my own life that the mental exercises only brought me so far. Sometimes they brought me nowhere at all, actually, where the embodied experiences are the ones that shifted the patterns, that really brought me places, and that really made a difference in my own life. And so that's what I practice when I'm working, whether it's in the women's circle, whether it's in the one-on-one work. This is what we work on. Okay, so this is a journey. And it requires time, and it requires deep inner work. So there's plenty out there promoting quick fixes, massive sisterhoods where superficiality is the flavor of the month. I am allergic to that. So a lot of lip service and fancy lingo that hides all the judgment behind forced smiles. That's what made me hate women's circles at the very beginning when I started looking into it. And so this is not what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. If you've come across that kind of container, if you've come across that kind of advertisement, you do know what I'm talking about. So I don't need to go into it. This is not me being judgmental. It's me being discerning. Okay, some places are not helpful. Some containers are not healing containers. They revalidate all the toxic patterns. They just do it in a really subtle way, which is really damaging. So no, this is not what I'm talking about. And it is super important to be discerning when you're choosing. You need to choose the right tribe for you, the right people, the right containers. And if you're not ready for a tribe, as in you feel like going into a women's circle, it's too much, because that's a thing as well. I've done a lot of work on myself one-on-one too, because there were times where I was like, it's too much to actually going into a circle. Although like it's a really super safe container, it still feels like, whoa, that's a bit far out for me. And the one-on-one work was super supportive. So like that's where you start feeling into yourself and you start really seeing where you need to be at this moment. Okay, and remember, the real friendship and connection is not based on numbers, okay, but on true depth. So to have like 1 million followers or 1 million friends on social media or like being able to talk to the entire town or whatever. That doesn't mean anything really. Um, and the starting point, which I haven't yet spoke to in this episode, but it's really important, okay, is that at first you need to open up to the friendship and connection that is available within yourself. Okay, can you be friend with yourself? That's a big question. Okay, like it's one you could be, I mean, you could be sitting and be with this for a long time. I won't even give it like a time frame, but for a long time, and feel how are you really friend with yourself, and can you be at this moment friend with yourself? You know, can you take in all of yourself, you know, the dark bits and the light and all the things in between, and accept it all? Can you do that? I still struggle with that. It's an ongoing process for sure, and one that doesn't have an end, which I find that always amazing and beautiful. The way that this work has no end. It's like a well, a really deep well, but it has no bottom. Like you can just keep going forever, but in a beautiful way, not in the exhausting way. It's just so rewarding every time you're finding a new pearl, a new treasure, and your life expands and becomes even more joyful, even more beautiful, even more meaningful. You can live from an even more alive and vital place. So yeah, I love that aspect of this work. And also you definitely don't have to nail the inner friendship with yourself before you create meaningful connections on the outside, but it is an essential part of the journey, one part that we really work on when we're working together. The two aspects, inner and outer, work in tandem, so they're both equally important. All I can say is that when you have the courage to dive in and embark on this journey, the result is a depth of connection you never knew was possible. And you realize on a very deep, real level that you are never alone. And that's a big thing. That's a big, big, big thing. So that was a big episode. There was a lot in this because it is a big topic, and it affects most of us, actually probably all of us in some way, whether we want to admit it or not. And yeah, so I hope this was helpful. Again, keep reaching out. You can send emails, ask questions, and if you are wanting to know about the women's circles, there's the link in the description. They're forming these weeks, so it's really a good time to get in, because you're gonna get in at the start of the circle, get in with all the other women at the same moment. Now you can always join later, of course, which is fine too, but yeah, I think this is a really good time to reach out and start, apply for it. Remember that you need to book a call to finish your application. That's important. Don't be scared. I don't bite, and I actually love connecting with you. That call is so important. We get to talk about so much. We get to know each other. You get to ask your questions, and that's where the connection starts. So I love those calls. I really love them. And also, I want to remind you that there's another few days left to register and apply for the 10 weeks one-on-one programs for the 4 spaces that I have opened. Yes, so to do that, you need to email me and tell me that you're interested, so I can send you the link for, again, a free call where you can ask questions, and then all the details also about the programs. This is a 10 weeks one-on-one program with 1 call a week, where we get to go deep into your personal situation, because on a one-on-one we just work on you. So yeah, that's super helpful as well. I I've gotten much benefit from the one-on-one work as well as the circles. They're both beneficial. They have different benefits, and they actually complement each other. I've had one of the biggest shifts in my life. I was receiving one-on-one support, and at the same time I was being in a women's circle, and the two things were really potent together. So one thing doesn't exclude the other, but definitely, just the registration for the 10 weeks one-on-one program for this wave of it is gonna end on this Friday, the 22nd, I believe it is. So reach out if you're interested, and then you can know more about it. And with that, I'm gonna leave you and send you lots of love. Bye for now.